I'm Thomas Bachem. People call me Tom usually. And currently I'm founding a private university called Code.
Could you summarize your professional experience for us?
I think my professional career started basically in my youth when I was starting to program things on my own. That was at around 13, 14 years old. And so through my youth, I used to develop software and websites for small shops around the corner and then bigger and bigger companies. And at the age of 19, I started my first startup, which was an online video platform called Sevenload. And I progressed, then sold the company in 2010, and then immediately basically founded the next company, an online gaming venture called FlipLife, which I then also sold 2 years later. And then I founded the German Startups Association, so basically a lobby organization for startups, which was a pretty different experience than founding a traditional company. After that, or even besides that, I worked on a private project called Lebenslauf.com, which is an online resume creator. And it started as a hobby project basically, but it grew so popular that in 2014 I sold it to Xing, which is a pretty large German social network for business people. And right now I'm founding Code.
When was the time you noticed the desire to start something on your own?
I think that basically came when I started programming, because at some point, I mean, like many children back then, I used to play games on the computer. But at some point I asked myself, okay, how can this be done? Like, how are these games and also the other software I was using, how can it be built? And I honestly cannot explain exactly how I came to that thought, but I think perhaps at that age you're still asking these stupid questions. Basically, you're still asking yourself, okay, how can it be done? And that's what I did. And then when I started like on a very tough road to learn to program, when there were the first successes, I realized that it actually can be done, and that really motivated me, I think, through all the life that came after to do things on my own.
Which skills did you learn early that helped you to found a company?
Actually, I think programming was the most important skill probably for me, because all of my companies were technical companies and needed technical skills to be started. And for me, it was pretty easy to start them because I didn't need any money. I could just program on my own in the very beginning. But I think a second skill, which is as similarly important to me, is being a bit naive about founding companies, about doing things. And with naive, I mean that somehow I don't have too much respect towards established companies and established things. So I always question things and how things are done today, and ask myself if there isn't another way to do them. And sometimes I wonder myself, like, how can I be so stupid to always bring myself into such difficult situations that I find myself in then, because I always go for these big goals. But in the end, it really helps, and I think basically every entrepreneur has a lot of, is quite naive about what he or she is trying to do, because otherwise he wouldn't start.
What kind of educational background did help you in founding your startups?
So actually since I already was very good at programming, when I came into age to study something, I decided to not study computer science or similar, also because it was very mathematical and theoretical for me, and for me personally, software development always was something very creative and pragmatic and hands-on, and I didn't find that in computer science studies. So instead I decided to study business at a private business school. And I must say I had a lot of fun, and I learned a lot about private universities, which is in hindsight pretty important because I'm founding a private university right now myself. But actually the stuff about business I learned didn't really help me at all in my career.
Was there something else that helped you?
I think what actually really helped me to grow as an entrepreneur and as a manager is that I was very active in school when it came to representing other students at school. So we had something in school called Schülervertretung, which is where like the other students elect a representative to do some things at the school. And I did this for many years. So I organized parties, I organized demonstrations, I organized sport activities, I participated in school conferences and organized things, and that really helped me to understand that school is not something I'm just like passively receiving or being a victim of, but school is something I can change and I can influence and I can be part of, and that's something I think that triggered something in me, and I learned a lot about organizing things and handling stuff, and I think perhaps that was the most important thing I learned in school.
Looking back at all those points you mentioned, which ones do you consider most important when founding a business?
Basically, I think like the motivational experience was the most important one, and that was actually the one in school where I learned that I can organize things, I can influence things, I can change things. I think that's the most important skill that made me an entrepreneur.
Did you have some kind of mastery experience where you were 100% sure that you're going to start a company?
For me, actually, it was pretty easy to do what I did. At least it feels like this to me, because I always just had to make very small steps toward the next level. So because I started programming when I was so young, I had the skills to build a prototype of my product, and then when the prototype was ready, building it into a company was a smaller step than founding it like from the scratch. So I think the combination of my skills made it always very easy for me. But since I was very young when I founded the first company, of course I wasn't super confident, and I never thought that the software that a 19-year-old person programmed on his own could be of real value to the outside world, basically, to the professional world. And at some point I realized that people were so into my software and loved it so much and called it like state of the art, and really like CEOs from big companies had a lot of respect towards my software. That was when I realized, okay, what you're doing has a lot of impact.
How was your family's or your friends' attitude towards startups when you started to think about creating a venture?
So my family is actually like, I have a pretty modern family, but pretty conservative when it comes to their jobs. So my father is a public accountant and my mother is a tax advisor. So pretty down-to-earth jobs that also involve a lot of correctness, discipline, and stuff like that. And that's basically my anti-skills. So not to say I'm not correct, but I'm not that like much into detail when it comes to stuff like that. I'm like, for me, accounting is something that needs to be done, but nothing that is an essential part of the company. But my parents were always very supportive, and so I think for a long time they didn't really get what I was doing, and so it was hard for them to really support me. I mean, in terms of advice and so on, I basically got nothing, but they didn't stop me, and I think that's very important. So they always said, they laughed that I do something that I love, and they basically didn't interfere. Yeah, I think that helped a lot.